Today on Eye on the Storm, we talk spring sports here at the University of Rio Grande. We'll be joined by baseball head coach Brad Warnimont, softball head coach Chris Hammond. We'll also check over what's going on with Rio basketball, all the current winter sports that are underway, and we'll talk about a Rio standout who got drafted at the professional level. That's all coming up next on Eye on the Storm. And we welcome you to the January edition of Eye on the Storm. I'm Randy Payton, the Sports Information Director here at the University of Rio Grande, as we take a look at what's coming up athletically here with the Red Storm and kind of check and see where things are as far as the winter season is underway. And as we said in our open, we'll be joined today by the baseball and softball head coaches. We'll have an interview with baseball head coach Brad Warnimont. And we'll be joined in studio, actually right now, by softball head coach Chris Hammond, whose team will begin its season, I guess, in a couple of weeks as you head south, and we'll play a bunch of games before you actually get a chance to play at home. But another good year for Rio softball last year, 4 straight River States Conference Tournament championships, a trip to the NAIA National Tournament, 35 wins last year, and the big question heading into 2019 is what have you got for an encore this year?
Well, I think the big thing is, we've got we got 2 seniors coming back that's going to provide leadership, and we've got a lot of young kids that I thought got good work in the fall, and then they've been working hard since we've returned back here in January for practice. So, just kind of excited to see how they play once we get out there and here in a couple weeks.
You're picked as the favorite again in the River States Conference. The poll released not that long ago as voted on by the 10 head coaches, and I think that speaks volumes to now what the program has become and how it's revered throughout the River States Conference.
Well, you try to set a culture of kids demanding more from themselves. Not only on the field but in the classroom, and I'm very proud of what we did academically last semester, and then then you carry that onto the softball field, and I think our girls like to just go out there and compete and then do the best we can.
In terms of personnel, you had a first-team All-American last year in Michaela Kreiner. She's back this year. You've also got a pitcher in Kelsey Conkey who arguably could have been an All-American last year and wasn't, so there are some building blocks with which to build upon.
Oh, absolutely, and then they're the ones that's going to have to provide the leadership and how our team grows this season, and we're expecting big things from those two, but I think the big thing is we've got more depth than what we've had in the past, I believe. I mean, we've got a lot of pieces, and I'll be probably rotating a little bit more than what I've done as far as lineups go. I think the one question mark into this season is who's going to fill that number 2 spot in the pitching rotation, the 2 and 3 spot. And you got to realize both those girls have no varsity innings pitched, so I think that's the big question mark of, now they've worked well in the fall, and then so far in January here they've really showed good strides, but we'll find out when they step in the circle.
Taking a look right now at a picture of Michaela Kreiner in a home game last year. We mentioned a first-team All-American last year, and to borrow a baseball, softball term, the kid can rake at the plate.
She is probably one of the best hitters I've ever been around. When she strikes out, you kind of you got to tip your hat to the pitcher. There's really no flaws with her at the plate at all. She has very good, quick hands, and she hits for power. She gets a lot of infield hits because of her speed. So she's just one of those kids that has the knack of getting on base, and that's why she's in the leadoff spot.
You mentioned about trying to find a number 2 pitcher behind Kelsey Conkey, and that obviously is a concern given the fact that she's a senior this year. I guess early on, Raylan Hastings is the front runner for number 2, but she's battling a bit of an injury issue right now.
We set her out of practice this past weekend, kind of back stiffness and everything, and so Nicole Brown, a freshman from Amelia High, got a lot of reps this week, looked very good in practice. You know, the one thing I've kind of stressed to those pitchers is last year we kind of saw a pattern of, especially in the conference, where the opposing team would throw their number 2 against Kelsey and then try to start their number 1 against our number 2 or 3 pitchers. So the one thing, and I really see the same thing this year. So that's the one thing that we've kind of stressed to those pitchers. Hey, you know, you're going to be probably facing the other team's ace.
Right.
So we need big things from you.
Talk about, we mentioned Kreiner, we mentioned Conkey. Talk about some of the newcomers to the roster that might be able to make a splash right out of the gate.
Kinsey Cremines is one that she's going to definitely add depth to us as a catcher. You know, Kayla Slutz definitely is our returning catcher, but Kinsey I thought had a great fall. And so she's going to get a lot of times behind the plate, and then she's also playing first base for us as well. Great athlete.
Really tough on not only you guys, but the baseball team as well early in the season, given the fact that we deal with all kinds of cold weather. You have to practice inside. You can't get outside. And then basically you spend the first 25 or 30 games of your schedule playing away just to be able to get games in.
Well, you know, you do the best you can. You know your offense is probably going to be a little bit behind because, you know, you're not hitting real balls. You're indoors. Right. So we're going to be fortunate enough, hopefully, knock on wood, that when we go to Gwinnett, they're going to allow us to use their field for a workout on Thursday night when we go down there. So that might be our only first chance to be on a field if the weather doesn't cooperate.
Your schedule in terms of facing good non-conference competition is, for lack of a better term, brutal. This
is probably the toughest schedule we've had since we've been here.
Who's responsible for that?
Yeah. Well, be careful what you wish for, right? This is probably the most brutal schedule that we've had since we've been here, and I think I counted up we're playing 5, 6 ranked teams above us, and then probably a couple receiving votes. So, that's one thing. We better bring it game in, game out, because if we don't, we can look very mediocre.
If you would, before we let you go, kind of give us a scouting report of the River States Conference. We mentioned that you were the unanimous favorite in the preseason poll, and I would have to assume that hot on your heels again is Indiana University Southeast, but it goes beyond the Red Storm and the Grenadiers as far as quality competition in this conference.
Well, I think when you look at our conference, Randy, I think the big thing that I see when I look at our is a lot of those teams are returning a lot of players. So they've got a lot of veterans, and granted, we didn't graduate a lot last year, but we're still pretty young. And I think I looked at Indiana Southeast roster, and it's like, man, those girls have been there for 10 years. And then CCU's got a lot returning. I really think from top to bottom in our conference, if you better play your best game, or you could be beat by anybody in our conference.
And your before we let you go, your first home game is when? I think it's
March 15th. We open up with Asbury here at home.
Seems like a long way away.
It seems like a long way away, but I'm sure I'm going to need that time to get the field ready for it to fall out and everything. And the one thing I do want to mention we didn't talk about is Carly Skees also being a senior a little bit, and I want to I know her numbers weren't where she wanted them last year, but how big part of a team that she's been of our team the last 3 years.
These seniors have really enjoyed a lot of success over the past few seasons, and you think it's got to dawn on them that this is their last go-around.
Well, Carly's working hard, and great kid, and she's going to be a 4-year starter, and her and Kelsey both. And you got to realize those two seniors are 123 and 32 in 3 years, and so I think they've worked hard, and we definitely want to send them out the right way.
Well, we appreciate your time today. We wish you good luck as the season starts in a couple of weeks, and we'll check back in as it gets underway, as you guys try to make it, 5 in a row in the conference.
That's the hardest part. Is winning it sometimes is easy, but to do it year in, year out,
Right.
that's the hardest part. So,
Good luck.
Well, thank you very much.
That's Chris Hammond, the head softball coach here at the University of Rio Grande. As we said, his team getting its 2019 season underway in early February. Also getting underway actually this weekend, the University of Rio Grande baseball team. They will head down to Georgia for a 3-game series against Brewton Parker College. And earlier today, I had a chance to sit down and chat with Rio Grande head coach Brad Warnimont about that series this weekend and the upcoming season. Back here on Eye on the Storm, Randy Payton, Sports Information Director, joined now by head baseball coach Brad Warnimont. Odd as it is to believe, here we are in the latter part of January, and you guys start your 2019 season this weekend with a road trip down to Georgia to play Brewton Parker, and I guess it's the exciting time of the year to get things started.
Yeah, it was. This is probably the earliest we've ever opened up, being in January, but it was one of those things. We had 3 games to schedule yet, and the email went out that they were looking for an opponent, and you know, it's sort of a win-win for us when we keep the kids in class. We're not missing any of those midweek classes, and we're able to travel on a Thursday afternoon late, so we limit our missed classes, and we're able to get out on the diamond and get a series in before we face a couple of nationally ranked teams the following weekend with Bryan and Tennessee Wesleyan. So hopefully we'll brush the cobwebs off and be ready to roll.
Kind of talk about your schedule a little bit. I know you did try to beef it up, and you mentioned there's some ranked opponents that lay in wait.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is for me, and now I'm the ARC chair, so I'll be heading up the 4 conferences and really evaluating strength of schedule, and that's a vital component when you're looking at postseason play and bringing some visibility to our conference. And you know, so we've scheduled a very competitive schedule again, along with Northern Kentucky again, and that was a big win for us last year.
Right.
And you know, we've got Tennessee Wesleyan, which is currently 12th. We've got Bryan, that's 15th. We've got Campbellsville on there, that's 17th. And UNOH right now, that's 10th. And all those games are on the road. So it'll be a good test for us. So if we can come out of there victorious and have a good road record against those teams, I think that'll bode well for us and the conference as a whole as far as visibility goes.
Talk about having to play on the road, and I guess we're a prisoner of the weather situation that we've got. You guys will have a bunch of games already played by the time you ever play the first one here at Bob Evans Field.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I looked back and I was talking over with the assistant coaches, and I sort of went back through the archives a little bit back in 15 and 16 when we were successful. And 16 we had 15 home games, Randy. So it was one of those things that with weather. I think when you go on the road and you're able to win on the road, you build a lot of character. You have to overcome a lot of different adverse situations when you're on the road as far as travel, and I think it makes your kids road worry. I mean, you know, they go into a situation and, you know, we were able to be successful in the national tournament and the conference tournament, and, you know, I think it gets your guys acclimated to playing on the road and, you know, getting acclimated to a different setting and a different field and how the field plays. And I like that. I mean, I don't think – I want to see it as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. Obviously, sleeping in your own beds, but, you know, if your guys can overcome some of those adversities and play at the level they need to play at, I think, you know, we get ahead of the game that way.
Kind of talk about your personnel and going into this 2019 season. I know you've got some building blocks and returning kids that are back, but there's plenty of new faces on this roster too.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with this year's roster is I think well, at least I hope we have the pitching staff figured out a little more than what we had last year. And we started using Dylan Shockley as a closer about halfway through the season, and he was still, you know, only a couple months out of surgery. So we didn't want to do that, and Dylan, in the sort of mutual agreement that we started using him as a closer on limited bullpens. Now we've had a whole year to actually get him on the mound and figure out what his strengths are, and you know, sort of solidifying that bullpen. And you know, having an arm like that at the end of your bullpen is vitally important. But I think we've got much better depth around him. We've now got some guys that are setup guys. We've got a couple left-handers that we didn't have last year, and hopefully that'll really bode well for our pitching staff. And you know, defensively, we do have a lot of new faces, but we got some key transfers in that we feel athletically are going to be able to play into our scheme of the game. And you know, we've got a nucleus of guys back in David Rodriguez and Dylan Shockley, Michael Rodriguez. So, you know, I think we're going to be okay there. It's just a matter of, you know, taking care of the baseball again, and, you know, comes down to scoring more runs than your opponent.
You talked about Shockley at the back end of the pitching situation. I guess on the front side, starting-wise, it's got to be probably Zach Harvey that anchors things in terms of your starting rotation.
Yes, and Zach has done a great job. I mean, as far as his consistency goes, and we've added another pitch to his repertoire, so he should be even more effective than what he has been. And he's been throwing the ball really well, and he's healthy, and so, I mean, that's vitally important. And Zach was also a player that was listed as a player to watch in collegiate baseball. So we're hoping Zach has that consistent year that we need him to have, and you know, we feel that's going to happen. I mean, he's been throwing the ball really well here in the winter months, and we look forward for a big year out of him.
Before we let you go, kind of scout the River States Conference, if you will. You always talk about IU Southeast and Point Park. Midway's had some good teams in the past. Of course, Rio's been in the mix, and that pretty much is the way it's going to be again this year.
Well, I think you know, Kokomo on paper, they have almost their entire team back. I mean, he went junior college heavy the first year, so those kids that were juniors are now seniors. He had a couple freshman pitchers that fit into the mix. IU Southeast lost an awful lot. Point Park lost an awful lot, other than their entire starting pitching rotation, but they did lose their closer. But teams that win know how to win. And the tradition, you know, they reload, and they'll come ready to play. Now Midway has a lot returning. I mean, and they were preseason picked fourth, or they were picked fifth, just behind us. And I think both of us are sort of sitting in a catbird seat with something to prove. And with a lot of these teams that have lost a lot, and you know, everybody looks about the same on paper. You start rolling out the balls, and you get things sorted out.
Coach, we appreciate your time. Good luck as you start the season this weekend, and good luck throughout the season as a whole.
Thanks, Randy.
All right, that's head coach Brad Warnimont, the baseball coach here at the University of Rio Grande, excuse me, joining us on Eye on the Storm. Appreciate Coach Warnimont for joining us earlier today. The original plan was to have him on the show live, but this thing called class came up, and he's a instructor here at the university and had class and could not make it, but made time in his schedule this morning to help us out. We turn our attention now to men's soccer, and a pretty nice accomplishment for a Rio Grande standout in Mitchell Osmond, who recently was drafted by the Minnesota United of the Major League Soccer in the Super Draft, 9th overall. And of course, Mitch, a first-team All-American this past season with the Red Storm. He spent 3 seasons as a member of the Thunder Bay Chill in the PDL League, and just a nice, he was one of the few NAI players who was invited to the pre-draft workouts, if you will, and did get drafted, and I believe is only the second Rio Grande player to ever be drafted in that situation at the professional level. So obviously we wish Mitch the best in his future endeavors, and we'll be charting his accomplishments with the Minnesota United. We now look into what we're having going on during the course of the winter sports season, and we'll start with women's basketball. And what started out as a promising season for Rio Grande has really taken a turn south. Began the season in the preseason top 25 and actually fell out of the top 25 for the first time yesterday. And a lot of that has to do with injuries. They've dropped 5 games in a row, have lost 5 players from the varsity roster since the season began. 3 of those are starters. 2 of them were preseason all-conference selections in Sydney Holden and Jasmine Smith, and 4 of the 5 suffered season-ending knee injuries. So it's really been a tough stretch for Coach Smalley and his club. They fell at Carlo last night, 70-65. We'll hit the road again tomorrow, long road trip to Indiana Kokomo, and on Saturday they'll be playing at Cincinnati Christian. There are a couple of bright spots, though. Jada Carter named the River States Conference Player of the Week for 3 times this season, and Jada leading the River States Conference in scoring at about 19 points per game, and also Jimmy Howe, who earlier this year also earned a River States Conference Player of the Week honors. But she is in the lineup right now and playing with shin splints along with Megan Didway. So Coach Smalley down to 9 players in uniform. 2 of those 9 aren't completely healthy. So a season that began very promising. They were 13-4 at one point, but as we said, they've now lost 5 games in a row, 13-9. They're 4-6 in the River States Conference and fighting for a chance to play in the conference tournament later on this year. And they will wrap up a 5-game road swing beginning tomorrow night at IU Kokomo, as we said, and at Cincinnati Christian on Saturday. There are live broadcast links and live stat links that you can find if you want to follow those games this weekend at RioRedStorm.com. Rio returns to action at home on the 29th of this month when Indiana University East visits the Newt Oliver Arena. We look ahead to men's basketball, and while the women have struggled of late, the men have actually picked up the pace a little bit, have won 2 of their last 3. They interplay tomorrow night at IU Kokomo with a 9-14 record overall, 3-7 in league play. Last night, a 90-62 win at Carlo, and they did that without the services of probably their best overall player in Gunnar Short, a freshman out of Catlettsburg, Kentucky. He twisted an ankle in practice on Monday night. And will be out at least 2 weeks. Made the trip last night in a cast, but Rio Grande fortunately able to pull off the win and defeat Carlo rather handily, 90-62. We mentioned that they have won 2 of their last 3, and that came on the heels of a 7-game losing streak, and both of those 2 wins on the road. They surprised, or they beat Midway back on last Thursday, and then, as we said, they take down Carlo last night. And we mentioned Gunnar Short as the leading scorer, for the second leading scorer for Rio Grande. I think we've got a picture of Cam Schreider, who is actually the team's leading scorer against West Virginia Tech. Do we have that shot? Nope. That would be Jimmy Howe from the women's basketball team, which we said earned a Player of the Week. There's Jada Carter from the women's team, who also earned a 3-time Player of the Week honor, and I think that next shot will be Cam Schreider. There he is. We thought we'd lost him, but we found him. There he is against West Virginia Tech. Cam actually leading the team in scoring at 13.5 points and 6.5 rebounds per game. So they, like the women, will be at IU Kokomo on Thursday night, and will play in Cincinnati against Cincinnati Christian on Saturday afternoon before returning home on the 29th to host IU East. Looking now at men's bowling, a program that, as we said, is in its 2nd year here at the University of Rio Grande, and has found its way into the top 20. I think the last rating that I saw, the Red Storm were ranked 13th overall, and in their last outing, which came at the Buckeye Baker event up in Columbus, Ohio, on the 12th and 13th of January, they had their best finish as a program. They finished 2nd. They made the championship round, and unfortunately came up short against eventual tournament champion Pikeville. But they did finish 2nd and are doing very well. They continue to recruit and add to that program, and they will be in action this weekend, also back in Columbus at the American Heartland Conference events number 3 and 4, and that will wrap up their schedule in January. Taking a look at the women, they are basically playing in the same events that the men's bowling team is participating in. They finished 9th at the Buckeye Baker back on the 12th and the 13th in Columbus, and they too will be part of the Heartland Conference event number 3 and event number 4, those scheduled for this weekend, Saturday and Sunday in Columbus. The women, their best finish of the year, actually, if I look down the list here, probably was the Lehigh Valley Classic. They were 9th in that after one day of action. The indoor track is in full swing. They are back in action this weekend, actually splitting their schedule a little bit. They will be on Friday at Findlay University for a handful of events. They'll be back at Findlay on Saturday as well, and also competing at Capitol. Coach Bob Willey and his squad, not too much left to go in the indoor season. A couple of events, actually 3 events in the month of February, and then those who are fortunate enough to qualify for the NAI Indoor Nationals, those are scheduled for late February into early March. And if you're unfamiliar with the indoor track setup, it is something you don't see a lot of team score setups like you do in the outfield or outdoor season. It is predominantly an individual thing during the course of the indoor season, so no team scores. You can't say, hey, they won this event, they won that event. It's basically set up for individuals during the indoor season, and as we said, that will wrap up with the conclusion of their schedule in February, which features a trip to Denison University on February the 2nd. They'll be a part of the River States Conference Championship up at Tiffin University on the 8th of February. The squad will split and go back to Findlay, and some will go to Kent State University on the 16th of February. And we said, as all those who are fortunate enough to qualify for the national event, that will be held at Dakota State University, and that will run February the 28th through March the 2nd. With that said, we have a wrap on our January edition of Eye on the Storm. We appreciate Coach Brad Warnimont and Coach Chris Hammond for joining us. Again, they get their season started baseball this weekend down at Bruton Parker in Georgia. There are links to live video for those games also at rioredstorm.com. Softball will begin its season down in Georgia on the opening week in February. Basketball, as we said, continues a road swing tonight, or tomorrow night rather, in Kokomo, Indiana, and we'll finish up in Cincinnati on Saturday afternoon. We appreciate Chris Hammond, we appreciate Brad Warnimont for joining us, and we appreciate you for tuning in wherever you might be. I'm Randy Payton, the Sports Information Director here at the University of Rio Grande, and this has been Eye on the Storm. We'll see you next time.